There are 7 goals for running an effective economy: an improved standard of living, economic growth, full employment, stable prices, balance of international trade, an equitable distribution of income, and manageable government debt and deficit. So if you're running an economy, you choose what to prioritize, and typically you choose from this list of 7. Now, it's impossible to achieve all of them simultaneously because some of them conflict. In the next couple videos, we're going to be looking at these different goals. How do you measure them? Where do we currently stand? And which ones can you achieve simultaneously? So let's start with the first one, which is improved standard of living. So we talk about the improved standard of living. We're talking about the degree to which people have access to goods and services that make their life better, make it easier, make them healthier, happier, safer, make their life more enjoyable. So this can be access to education, to healthcare, to a cleaner environment, to jobs and good pay. This access to entertainment and culture as well. So how do we measure the standard of living? Well, we measure it based on gross national income per capita. So national income is how we get paid. And if you recall the previous level, we talked about how we pay for the resources we use to make goods and services. So when we talk about national income, we're talking about those factor payments. That is how we pay for those factors of production. So what were the 4 factors of production? They were land, labor, capital, and enterprise. So how do we pay for land? We paid for land with rent. Okay. We paid for labor with wages. We paid for capital with interest. And we rewarded our entrepreneurs by giving them profits. So our factor payments, rent, interest, wages, profit, okay, and you can put them in any order you want. If we add them together, that is our national income. That's all the ways that we make money. We sell our labor, we sell the raw materials that we have, we sell our capital, our machines, and we earn profits as entrepreneurs. So our national income is all the ways we make money. It's the combination of those factor payments: wages, interest, rent, and profits. And we look at it per capita. So we really want to know if individuals are better off. And so we have to take that total amount of money that we're making and divide it by the population. That's the per capita part. Now, we look at gross national income per capita. So this gross gives a special meaning. So gross national income per capita is the wages, interest, rent, and profits by Canadians, regardless of where they live. So when we talk about national income is the money that's being earned by everybody within the country. So for example, I'm not a Canadian citizen, so I'm included in national income because I make wages here in Canada. But gross national income is the wages, interest, rent, and profits by Canadians, both living inside the country and out. And the reason that we look at gross national income per capita is because we want to look at what our people have access to. So we have to consider that Canadians may be earning money, wages, interest, rent, or profit from work they do abroad or from work they're doing here. So we want to know how well our population, our citizens are doing. Do they have access to the goods and services? And there are many countries where a lot of the workforce is essentially sent out to other countries to do work and bring money back. And so we want to make sure we capture that, because that money coming back into the country from sending off family members to work abroad does increase the access to goods and services at home. So we're looking at gross national income per capita. All right, so now we want to know how are we doing when it comes to gross national income per capita? What has been happening to our access to those things that make our life better? Well, so to look at this, we want to look at that GNI per capita. We want to look at gross. Oops, sorry, that's redundant. We want to look at gross national income per capita, which is GNI, and we want to put it in real terms. And the reason we put it in real terms is we want to take out inflation. If we want to know if you really have access to more goods and services, then we have to look at what you can actually get with your money. Because the thing is that your income could go up. You could get a raise, but if that raise is less than the amount that inflation is, the increase in the costs to live, then you're not really better off. You don't have access to more goods and services because your money doesn't go as far as it used to. So we look at it in terms of real terms. We take out inflation. We'll learn later this semester how you find real income, how you take out inflation. So right now we're looking at real GNI per capita. Now the challenge with focusing on real GNI per capita, of course, is that it is an average. It doesn't guarantee that every person is better off. Okay, so we are looking at the average person. Some people might be worse off. They might get laid off while other people's income goes up. The other thing we have to take into consideration is that just because on average we're getting more income per person, there may be an increased impact on the environment. So we may all be working really hard and making lots of money because we're strip mining the entire territory, and so we're damaging the environment. Or we might have a lot of crime in our area. So those factors are not taken into consideration when we look at GNI per capita. So the challenge with using real GNI per capita to measure the standard of living is it's really just narrowly focused on income as a barometer for your ability to buy yourself access to things that make your life better. So let's look at how we're doing. All right, so first we can look at that real GNI per capita over time. And here you can see the 1930s to onto the 2000s. If we were to look at GNI per capita today, so in Canadian dollars, our GNI per capita is 59,358. So you can see that over time, our real income has increased, suggesting that we can buy more goods and services to make our lives better than the generations before us. So our standard of living has improved, right? If you think back to your grandparents, your great-grandparents, we have indoor plumbing, we have electricity, we have refrigerators, and they don't. So the life is getting better as we get more income that buys more goods and services, that increases our health, our happiness, and so on. Well, how do we compare to other countries? Okay, well here you see the GNI per capita of a number of other countries. And if you look in Blackboard, there's a link. You can check out the GNI per capita to all the countries. So maybe the one you're looking for isn't here. But we can see some of the countries that have the highest GNI per capita in the world, as well as some that have the lowest. And you can see in Canada, our GNI per capita is listed as $47,280. This is in international dollars. It used to be when we compared countries, we did it always in US dollars, but since the US is no longer the dominant economy worldwide, we now use what are called international dollars, which is kind of a basket of currencies. It's a weighted average so that we can compare across lots of different countries. So you can see here Canada's GNI per capita in international dollars is $47,000 compared to the US at $63,000. Now, GNI per capita is not the only way to look at standard of living. There are other ways to measure standard of living. Okay, so in addition to looking at GNI per capita, we can also measure standard of living with the Human Development Index, or by looking at the poverty rate or the education rate. The Human Development Index takes that GNI per capita and combines it with information about life expectancy. Excuse me, and education. Okay. So we'll look at the Human Development Index, HDI, in just a moment, but let's first look at education. So we can compare standard of living across countries by looking at the education rates. There is a test called the PISA test. It's the Program for International Student Achievement. And in fact, in 2009, if you were in high school in Red Deer in 2009, then you were actually part of the Canadian sample that year. And so this is a test done by many countries to measure the aptitude of students so that we can compare how our education rates do across countries. So here you can see the 2006 and the 2012 rankings, and you can see Canada here in green. Notice that we have fallen in math as well as in reading. And you can see that Hong Kong, China rank the highest in reading, Singapore, China rank the highest in mathematics. So here's a question for you. How do we get an increased standard of living measured by the education rate? So what if we spent more on education? Would that improve our education? What if we paid instructors more? Would that make a difference? Well, here you can see on the left, you can see public spending on education as a percentage of gross domestic product, so the size of the economy, or as a percentage of the government budget. And so when you look at this, is there a difference in those with the highest education rankings versus much lower? So it seems like maybe there's not so much of a relationship between the amount you spend and the ranking of your country in education. On the right, what you see there is the payment of the salaries of teachers. And so the question, of course, is whether or not if you pay your teachers more, does that mean that your students will perform better? All right, so we're measuring the standard of living. And the standard of living we can measure with GNI, gross national income per capita. We can measure it based on the education rate. We can also do it based on the Human Development Index. And the Human Development Index, is a combination of life expectancy, education, and GNI per capita. Here in this Human Development Index slides, you can see from the 1980s to the 2010s which countries had in human development and which ones saw the greatest declines. And in this slide, of course, my slides don't move. Here we go. In this slide, we can see the Human Development Index for a number of countries. So remember, the Human Development Index is a combination of life expectancy, average years of schooling, as well as the gross national income per capita. And so you can see Norway is at the top. They rank number 1. The US ranks number 4. And Canada ranks number 6 in the world. So we look at this, we can actually see why the US might be slightly higher than Canada. And so you'll notice in terms of gross national income per capita, the US has a slightly higher GNI per capita, even though Canada has a higher life expectancy. So you can see here a number of the Human Development Index numbers for those countries.